Welcome back to the mental space. Now, my guest today, if you were to go onto Google and search the headlines, you'd see lots of different stories. And I wanted an independent view. So I actually went onto AI and asked Google Bard to describe our guest today. And Google Bard summed him up as, and I'll read this, a courageous and outspoken individual who is using his platform to speak out against racism. He's a role model for young people, and his work is making a positive difference to the lives of many young people. Welcome today to the mental space, my guest, Azeem Rafiq. Azeem, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Scott. That's nice from Google.
That's Google Bard. That's AI. So I thought I'd get the unbiased view. If we look back at your career, I mean, many people will know who you are. Former England cricketer, former Yorkshire cricketer, youngest captain of Yorkshire Cricket Club when you took over. I think from Andrew Gale was that while he was off. Youngest Asian player to captain Yorkshire Cricket Club as well.
The first South Asian first British South Asian and the only, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen so many plaudits for your cricketing career, which seemed from the outside to be going great guns, seemed to be a stellar career. But once you scratched underneath the surface, quite often with public figures' lives, it was very, very different, wasn't it? And I know that you blew the whistle on racism, which sparked a massive investigation into Yorkshire County Cricket Club and also England cricket. Bring us just kind of bang up to date to start with, because you've really been through the mill over the last few years. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I mean, till you sort of mentioned the cricket aspect of it, and, you know, over the last sort of 12 months, 24 months, spoken a lot about, racism and speaking out and how that's impacted me, openly. So the more I've done that, the easier it's got to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it's the cricket aspect that when people touch that, you know, even just now there, straight away I could see I had to stop myself and I was filling up because, you know, Scott, it's the thing I've not spoken about probably enough because I didn't want the conversation to go away from racism. But, you know, it hurts. It hurts. My whole family sort of sacrificed their sort of existence and where they wanted to live in the world when we moved from Pakistan for me to be able to achieve play cricket. And, you know, everyone thought I was living a dream. You know, youngest ever Yorkshire captain, the first one and the only one from British South Asian.
Yeah.
Captain England under 19s at a World Cup, you know, playing on TV, everything that comes with it, you know, you think I'm living my dream and a lot of other people's dream. But, you know, that I was struggling with my mental health and struggling with it all so much for a very long time and not really knowing what it was that was making me feel that way. But, you know, cricket from the minute I could walk has been love, passion, you know, live and breathe it. And to have got to a place where to have that taken away from me, have that love taken away. I mean, the career, you know, I was 12th man in Mumbai, you know, when England played India.
Yeah.
I watched that great innings, you know, with Peterson and Cook. And, you know, that was the path. And, you know, I felt really not far away from it. So, you know, losing all that was one thing, but to lose the love and the passion that I've had for a game for a period of time has been heartbreaking. And, you know, the one thing I guess there is days where I'm just driving on my own and thinking about it, and, you know, that feeling is still is raw, it's there, and you know, there are nights where, you know, I still sort of cry inside thinking of what I've lost. But, you know, at the same time, my father said to me on the day that I was in front of the select committee that, you know, what I did on that day is bigger than any runs or wickets or World Cups I could have won or Ashes series I could have been part of. And, you know, I have a renewed positive passion, something I get out of bed for. And, you know, hopefully I can keep doing what Google AI says I've been doing.
I mean, look, I've got a bunch of questions here, but I'm tempted to throw them away and look, we'll just have the conversation. It's fascinating because I think there'll be plenty of, men and women, but particularly guys out there that their identity is so linked to what they do. And it feels like for the longest time, where did cricket end and where did Azeem start? Were they mixed? And then once that's ripped away from you, once that purpose or that sense of meaning that your ability at that sport has given you, how do you piece yourself back together once you've lost that? Because there's lots of people, particularly in this kind of economic environment here, we're looking in the UAE, but in the rest of the world, lots of people lose their jobs. All of a sudden, having been one thing for a long time, all of a sudden they're facing up to the fact that they're not that, they can't do that role anymore. And then they're left with the question of like, well, who am I? So, did you find out who Azeem Rafiq is or was, and how did you do that after you left cricket?
Yeah, look, I mean, initially I left in 2018, but I just left. I lost my son, and I lost my career in the space of a few months. And I, obviously everything that's come out since, and the way that was all handled, and try and take it back to the cricket. And I joined the club back in 2016 when the club was, in T20 cricket. They were bottom of the league. They hadn't won a game. And I came in and performed. I ended up being leading wicket taker after missing games, and we got to the finals day again. So, and through 2017, I was, I think leading wicket taker for Yorkshire in both white ball competitions in a team full of England stars. Mm-hmm. So, the performances were there, and, so I hadn't lost my ability to perform. And to suddenly have a situation where, because in 2017, I raised at that time, I raised a sort of a question around what I felt was bullying. Because, people of colour, when they start, they try and look at any other reason it could be before the looking at racism, because it becomes draining and you start looking everything from that lens. And, I can honestly say I was probably trying to look the other way for a very long time. So because of me raising that, I felt that when we went through a difficult pregnancy, which in the end meant we lost our son, the way I was treated around that was just so inhuman that at that point I had lost everything for cricket. And, people around cricket, and, these, bearing in mind, there's a lot of a lot of these people sort of, my mum cooked food for them. They lived. Some of them stayed with at my house. So I'd known these people for best part of a decade and a half. And on the day that I took my son from the hospital to graveyard, only one of the guys came to support me. So going back to the question a little bit, I lost my son, and then I lost my career, and I lost all faith in humanity. Mm-hmm. And I picked up my bags, passed my dad my keys to my flat, and said, I'm never coming back. And I guess in that sort of phase, it was very much about dealing with how I was myself, but also, supporting my wife. And, a lot of people said to me, make sure you don't neglect yourself. But Scott, how could I not? Yeah. I was coming home and my wife was, I was leaving my flat worrying as to, my wife's well-being when I get back. Yeah. In the end, we had immense family support around us, and we got through that phase. But even at that stage, I was still Azeem Rafiq, the cricketer. I played a little bit when I was in Pakistan, but didn't, the love just wasn't there. And then when I came back to the UK, we had our son, and then I thought, right, I'm going to get myself fit. I'm going to pick myself back up. The one thing that I've got a lot of is fight and resilience. If I get myself in a zone, I make sure, a couple of times where I found myself in dark places, I nearly committed suicide a couple of times, and I found myself in some real dark spaces. Yeah. I think consciously or subconsciously, I've found a method and a plan to come out of it. And one of the big things I say to myself is do it when my mind tells me I'm ready to. So instead of pushing, a lot of people can, when they find themselves in spaces and they want to come out of it, can push the other way too hard. And it's sort of understanding your mind, listening to it. And then I always felt that when I was ready, something will click. But till then, I'm going to be kind to myself. And if there's days I don't want to get out of bed, I'm going to stay in bed.
Yeah.
If there's days I want to eat junk food, I'm going to eat it. I'm not going to, this whole thing around mental toughness and, sort of letting the mind, and our mind's so powerful. But at the same time, if the mind is done, there's no way you can break past that. You might be able to for a short period, but it will always come back. So, I thought myself, I was doing, and I have a real thing where physical well-being has a real connection to my mental space. And I started to, push myself a little bit at a time and then sort of coming back. And then something just clicked and I felt like I was doing spinning classics at 6 o'clock in the morning. And genuinely, I was half asleep. I wasn't even awake, but I was doing them, getting back, and then sort of I started getting myself fit and felt like, right, I'm going to go back and trial and get myself back there. And then COVID hit. And I think COVID was a real moment for everyone, reflection point. Everything shut down.
Yeah.
And, a lot of my friends were working in the A&E at NHS. And, initially just started sort of going and giving them some, food, some fruits, and just delivering all that for them. And that turned into, something we did as a family where we cooked meals, sold them and raised money for the hospice. But also, every week to key workers, we delivered food. That sort of, gave me a real purpose, gave the family a real purpose, while knowing two of our members, my dad and my sister were in the, in the vulnerable category as well. That started, I got a real pleasure out of that. And then, my second love after cricket is food. So I thought, right, we're going to do something as a business after.
Yeah.
And that's where, my interview came. We were opening a tea place, an Asian tea place in a container, which, so that's where my sort of interview came with Wisdom about. And I got asked a question whether I'd face prejudice. And, there was a real build-up around that time for a lot of people of colour. The George Floyd moment was important. But then I saw Yorkshire put diversity logos on their sleeves, and that irritated me.
Yeah, I can.
And then I saw an interview with the director of cricket at the time and the local press, Yorkshire Post, who obviously have been pretty vocal on the other side of this, talking about how he'd never been in a dressing room that experienced or had anything to do with racism. And that really got me emotional because, I'd sat in a room with him, the director of cricket and the PCA, and a friend only 2 years ago, and really opened my heart out. I was in tears in that meeting. So, the thing that it goes back to is around sport and a lot of workplaces as well, corporate world, I'm sure as well, maybe a bit further, but there's a lot of these things about it's okay to speak, we're here for you. Mental health, equality. A lot of these things are used as PR activities and tick boxes. And what I've learned over this last 3 years, but before, the lack of authenticity and honesty really irritates me. As a person, that gets to me more than anything else.
Yeah.
And I saw that. So when I had this interview and I got asked a question, the interview was about my new business and me moving on with my life.
Floodgates opened.
I just got emotional.
Yeah.
I got really emotional, and I said a bit, but I didn't say a hell of a lot. I talked about, I touched upon some things that had happened and how I had an openly racist captain, and how it had got me close, how it had really sort of made me feel, but I didn't really open up at that time, Scott. And Yorkshire just ignored it. And that really got, I got really annoyed by that. And then I got asked to go on a podcast with someone who used to work at Yorkshire and is now a freelance, has a podcast, does a lot of media stuff. Then I opened up a little bit more, and Yorkshire's response was, well, he hasn't said Yorkshire. And, you know, I only played for Derbyshire for a month on loan, and Yorkshire. So, you know, at that point, it went to George DeBell, who was the senior correspondent at Cricinfo. And then again, Yorkshire sort of said to him that I'd been in regular contact with the Inclusivity and Diversity board member. And, you know, he'd sent me a message. I hadn't been in regular contact with him around this. And I think it was really at that point, I opened up a bit more and talked about, you know, where I came close to taking my own life. Yeah. And I think the reaction from there onwards, I just felt like, and I knew that I wasn't talking just about myself, but I didn't realize the extent that I was talking about for the country and the world. I felt like I was talking about other people in cricket.
Yeah.
And then from there onwards, it's just been a journey.
I mean, let's kind of almost fast forward through some of that for our audience, because you've gone through, you gave evidence at the select committee, you detailed some of your experiences, you've had a number of individuals at Yorkshire Cricket Club put their hand up and admit wrongdoing. I think Yorkshire Cricket Club were fined £200,000, was it?
Well, they haven't been yet. They've got their actually the end of this month. They will have the sanction done the end of this month.
Okay, right. But a lot of the experiences that you talked about have now come to fruition through the inquiry, and the individuals in the club have been sanctioned. However, throughout that process as well, you've been vilified, you've been dragged through the mud by the UK media. And I've spent 24 hours just looking through the headlines around you and your life over the last 3 years. And I genuinely don't know how you've maintained any sense of, or as you say, like faith in humanity. How have you done it?
I don't know. If I was being very honest, I don't know. I think Allah's, my faith has been important within that. But I think when I spoke out, and, for me, it was very important that I, don't get me wrong, Scott, there's days where I am seriously angry. There's days when I want to scream, shout, and talk about everything that's going on. My family house has been targeted. Yeah. The businesses have been absolutely trashed.
And look, you've been forced to move you have been forced to move your family out of it. And again, reading some of the headlines, you've had incidences where people have walked into your garden and defecated in your garden in the UK, because they basically don't want to face up to the truth of what's actually going on in terms of the UK and in terms of racism and in terms of the institutional nature of all of that. I'm watching the news at the minute, and as a former journalist, I look back at the media and go, what have you become? But it's interesting, I see parallels between your experience and Prince Harry, who's at the stand taking on the media actually this year. When you look back at what's happening, in the UK and with Prince Harry, are you cheering him on? Do you understand where he's coming from? Do you think he's got a case or a point? How much do you relate to what's happening there?
Yeah, and like you talk about the instances, right? And they don't just impact me.
Yeah,
they impact a lot of people around me, the people that have supported me. And you feel like sometimes you talk. I've been very open, and everyone's heard. But there's still a hell of a lot that goes on, behind them closed doors that people don't know, and the impact it has on your mental health. I've left days where I'm driving the car feeling like there's someone sat next to me videoing me. I'm having conversations with people, and I'm so scared, and that I'm having a normal conversation, how that's going to be used. I feel at times I felt like I've been, well, it's not even felt. I was just back in the UK last week, right? And I was in Asda, and, I was being filmed. And, you go to the sort of the press and the way it's been handled. It's been so interesting because it's gone through cycles.
Okay.
Initially, this is where it's a sort of, I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush, because if it wasn't for the media and certain sections of the media, I wouldn't have been heard in the first place.
Yeah.
But how that, when it sort of reached the height of it, how then to keep the story going, they had to really turn it 360 the other way.
Yeah.
to keep the story alive.
Build you up, then pull you down.
Yeah, and also a lot of them, and how they've gone about sort of, trying to get close to me, and then, try and sort of, keep the story going. And the one thing that's striking is they've got absolutely no interest whatsoever in the human element of anyone throughout this. And, and how for the society to get better, certain sections have been absolutely outstanding, but the upsetting or the difficult part has been watching people who, a lot of people will have a lot of respect for, high profile people within cricket who the perception outside will be how they're balanced, and I could sit here and name them and I wouldn't have a problem doing that, Scott. But the only reason I don't want to is because at that point it goes away from the actual issue.
I know, and you've always said that it's not about individuals, is it? It's more about, you are a campaigner for meaningful change in sport. You want things to change. And it's almost too easy in a way to lay the blame at, it was those 6 wrong-uns, it was those 6 bag eggs, and actually there's nothing institutional going on whatsoever.
Yeah, and that goes on to sort of the initial aspect of how the individuals have been. You talk about them getting sort of sanctioned and stuff. A lot of that lies right at Yorkshire's footstep and the old Yorkshire and the way the initial investigation was handled. Because I did an 8-hour interview where I talked about we cannot put this on individuals.
Yeah.
I have to tell you about individual occurrences for you to understand why, I feel that this is how it's made me feel and what's happened, for you to get a picture of why it's got that way. But, some of them came into that environment as 14, 15-year-olds. And, I've seen in the leadership has never sort of said, that's not acceptable. So going back to the press and Prince Harry, throughout, and in no way am I saying that I am, a royal, or I have got the level of intrusion that he has suffered through childhood, through what his mother suffered, and, the level of trauma. And that's what I see. I see a person that is carrying a level of trauma around with him, and at no point is anyone allowing him to heal, including family members. I've seen, when I've been living the last 3 years, I've been living it thinking, am I living in a film here? Is this really happening? And a lot of when he speaks and his wife and speak, and a lot of people go, they're living in their world of their own. They're actually not, Scott. These things are happening, and I look at the parallels and, from that first interview that a lot of things resonate, and how it makes you feel, how it destroys every part of your inside. A lot of people watch me and say, oh, you look in good space. And I'll be honest with you, inside I'm broken to my, bare button. There's a lot of trauma and a lot of hurt, a lot of things which I'm a glass half full person trying to build myself back together while having a young family and, your normal everyday challenges around health and family members. But I'm watching him right now in court and, absolutely I'm willing him on. Because I'm watching the parallels as well with the way it's been reported. We asked for an open hearing because for 2.5 years, no matter what was presented in front of certain aspects of our society, it was never going to be enough. I put it to the point I could have had body cam footage of being called a P word or, being treated. And some sections of our press and some sections of our society would just not believe me because it's tougher to face up, right? And so I'm watching, and we asked for this open hearing for it to be streamed so everyone could watch for themselves and see everything for themselves. And, in the end, we didn't get that because, and it was a hearing by the same press. And, the way that week was reported, and it's not something I've spoken about because I've wanted, I wanted cricket to have the opportunity and for everyone to sort of come together and start to, see real action. But at the same time, I'm not going to shy away from uncomfortable conversations. And, I don't at this stage, and I haven't seen it enough at this stage where behind the scenes properly away from the PR that I do feel that cricket is accepting and moving on. So the way that week was reported was just wrong in every way, shape and form. I was in that room. There were a lot of people in that room. And, the way that was reported was just not accurate. So it then begs the question, and I've asked myself a lot of the times, if I'm a normal person out there and I'm sort of, trying to make my view of the world or educate myself or understand what's happening in, very complex situations around the world, how do I find out? These guys are supposed to be my tool or my way to, make up my view or educate myself and understand what we should do. And, I can honestly say there is part of me willing Prince Harry on so much. There's certain people, the self-appointed custodians of free speech in the UK who have built a platform for themselves, and certain news groups, which I don't think I even need to say. I think people know exactly who I'm talking about, that are destroying every part of our society and actually destroying the very free speech that they think that they're standing up for, because it's free speech and it's open world till you question them. And then they because none of us are perfect. My first interview, and this is where I knew it was more than me. I knew I'd be the sacrificial lamb in this, because I know I'm not perfect. Some bits that have come and we're going to talk about, I didn't expect. But, I'm not proud of some of the things I did as a young person. But I knew that this was not about me or me being perfect or me being this poster boy in any way. There's been a lot of good stuff that I've been able to be part of, which I'm very grateful for. But, if I don't see any work as below me, and I'm confident in myself that I'll pick myself up and find my way in life. My aspect and my sort of view in all this was that, at some point for us to move forward and become respected in this society as people of color, as South Asians in England, was that someone had to, get past that initial bit and really push through and tell people what happens behind them closed doors. Because I know what the system does, and they tried it with me. They either try and buy you out with monetary value, or with a cushy job or a cushy role, which all of that played out with me.
Make you part of the establishment and try and then dilute what you've raised. Yeah,
and that's played out, and it still does. I go into rooms and it's like, recently I did with, and it, it's like, oh, what can we do for you? And I have been brought up in a manner that. I get a buzz out of, being part of something bigger than just myself.
Yeah.
But also, I'm not someone that's going to be, my values and, what I stand for ain't going to be bought for me to have success. For sale. Yeah. So
particularly after everything that you've gone through. I want to kind of go on sort of full on Stephen Bartlett. He always asks a question, which I love when he asks it of his guests, which is like, what do I need to know about your childhood and growing up and your parents and the values that they instilled in you to understand Azeem today?
Yeah, I think, brought up in Karachi, dad's very successful in businessman in properties, in construction, but dad worked his way. Dad was part of 8 siblings, and he was the only breadwinner, and absolute grafter. Worked in cassette shops when you used to have them cassettes. He used to tell us about where you're renting your cassette.
You're too young to remember cassettes.
Well, I remember bits of it. But, he was doing rental of cassettes on Bollywood movies and stuff like that. So real sort of salesman type sort of upbringing. And then, he moved to Bahrain to work in a bank. And then, he got married, came back. And then, he got introduced to someone and got into properties and just was very successful. And then around 2000, and then, myself, obviously, I'm 2 brothers, 3 sisters.
How old are you at this point?
I'm 32 right now.
Yeah. So how old were you then when all this was? When you're watching your dad doing?
5, 6 is when when he's into property. So I'm talking about. So as soon as he got married and had my elder sister, that's when he got into property. So the ones before, hearing from him stories and stuff, and then watching him just work hard. Also, the amount of people that always, there's 5 of us, like I said, 8 siblings his, supporting all his siblings. And then, how much time he had to support everyone. Dad still, to this day, supports a lot of families in Pakistan, widows who've got, responsibilities financially. So, that was sort of built into us without really knowing. And then, around 2001, Dad's business partner got kidnapped and burnt. And I just remember them few weeks and watching him on his prayer mat, just inconsolable, and watching when we found the body, the bloke was 6 foot, and we found a body that was left the side of this table. And I remember the image in the paper, and that really, that was real moment for Dad. We picked up, and it was obviously going to be tricky for anyone successful around that time in Karachi. It wasn't, it was starting to get really, really unsafe. And we went to Saudi Arabia to the pilgrimage. Dad's always looked after grandparents, so grandparents have always lived with us. So, there's a real sense of responsibility, togetherness, and that's sort of been instilled into me, and the responsibility so I was the eldest son, but I was very young at that time. So we moved to the UK, and we weren't going to stay there. We were going to move on to Canada, like the other business partners had. But Dad's brother ended up convincing him. But we found it really tough. The first few years, Eids were difficult. We've gone from having such a, I'd say a privileged life to where you could see putting food on was difficult, but Dad never sort of let it on to us. But it's the thing that he told me recently, really, that they got mum and dad had decided that we were going back. They'd had enough, finding it really difficult. 5 kids, grandparents, them too, and the next morning they were going to tell us, and the letter came through that I'd been selected for Yorkshire under 12s. And basically because of that, ended up staying put and did whatever he could to make ends meet, support my cricket, and basically gave away his whole life and everyone else's life for my dream. And that just sums Dad up, and that, where he's in his 40s at the time, sacrificed everything for us, for me, really. And that's instilled into me, and I guess that's where, once I've got out the sort of the cricket bubble a little bit, and but even when I was in the cricket bubble, when I was captaining and stuff, I remember in 2012 when so before I got the captaincy that year, we had a team full of stars, and our batting order was something that the players weren't happy with. So it was left to me as a 20-year-old to go to the coach, St Gillespie at the time, and say, look, Ruti wants to bat here, Gary wants to bat here, and Dick Miller wants to bat there. And, knowing full well that, that could have backfired for my own career. And, Dizzy was brilliant. He was like, look, it's your team, go for it. And we changed the batting order. And, that was the first time Yorkshire, and then I ended up becoming captain. Yeah. And that was the first time Yorkshire had got to the finals day.
How did you feel about that? And how did your family feel about that?
About the cricket?
About the cricket. About, in those early days when things were going well, what was that like as a, for you as a, because Matthew McConaughey writes about green lights, like, we don't even recognize when we're just speeding through every green light, everything's going really well. But how did it feel in that time?
Yeah, I think it was, now that I look back and reflect on it, at the time, obviously I was living in a bubble. Yeah. All I wanted to do, Scott, is play cricket for England, and be the best in the world. Whatever I try and do, I'm very much a all or nothing, and this can have a big impact on my mental health at times, because when I'm going for it, I am zoned in, going full throttle. It's 3 times gym. It's healthy eating. There's just no sort of half measures. And I just felt like, I was just playing cricket and enjoying my life. And, it was around the time where I'd started to try and fit in, and, I'd started to do stuff which was against my religion, against my faith. And actually, clearly, subconsciously, even at the time. So end of that year, I got picked for the Lions. I was told I was more or less sort of next in if there was an injury in the England team. I just got youngest ever Yorkshire captain. I got the team promoted, been to the Champions League, played against, the likes of MS Dhoni, Sachin Tendulkar, and these people. So, but that last game of the year, I got 7 wickets in the game, 8 wickets in the game, 15 both innings, got us promoted. But when we went out for the celebration, on the way back from that night out, I was in tears, cried my eyes out to my teammate. So clearly, even subconsciously at the time, something was not right. Yeah. And, I was clearly doing really well from a cricket point of view, but me as a human being and me as a person, that trying to fit into that environment.
You weren't living to your values.
I wasn't living to who I was and who my family had brought me up to be. Yeah. And so, although there was a lot of cricket success, and it wasn't long after that, in 2013, where, I was on the other side of my flat, a balcony, and taking antidepressants, and so. Actually,
I'm gonna keep you there. I'm gonna keep you there if you can. Tell me about that.
Yeah, 2012 was this moment where doing so well, and cricket-wise, careers progressing. This is where people, when people say I was doing so well, how can he be struggling? But I was struggling. I was really struggling. With the whole fitting in element of it. I was going out drinking. My behavior around women. It wasn't me. It wasn't what what my family had brought me up. It wasn't true to my values, my religion, my culture. And I think this is something that's not spoken about enough, is as South Asians in England, we end up living 2 different lives.
Yeah.
One life at home, and then we feel like we have to live in a certain manner to be able to
put a mask on.
Yeah, to be able to progress in our chosen careers.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to a lot of people in corporate world about this and stuff, and I guess the over reliance on socializing around alcohol and especially in sports around women and that sort of toxic masculinity, that's seen as a real sort of focus of every day. And clearly, subconsciously, I was seeing someone else of a similar background and faith doing it, and thought, and getting a lot of opportunities, but being loved in the dressing rooms and respected. So that was clearly having a lot more effect than I felt. And then pre-season, the winter was difficult. Pre-season tour, just before pre-season, I got injured. Went on the pre-season tour, and I just felt so. I felt like I let myself down. I felt like I let my family down. I'm not the most religious, but respect and I try and be as good as I can. And obviously, doing the things that I was doing, I felt like I got myself in this place where I wasn't here or there, and I wasn't valued here or there.
You were lost.
I was lost. I remember I had this moment in Barbados. We were in Barbados for pre-season tour, and I'd been out that night. I had an ankle injury. I had an argument with the physio who I didn't feel like supported me through the Lions tour. And, the team went to play and I stayed at the hotel, and I just looked myself in the mirror. I was like, what am I doing? And then, we went back to the UK and, night before my surgery, I was going to decide that, it's best to have a surgery on my knee. I just felt like, felt useless. I felt like I'd let my dad, although I didn't know about the fact that he'd,
Yeah.
done that. But I knew the sacrifices, but I also knew the sacrifices my siblings and everyone had gone through. And, I'd felt like I let them down. I felt like it was a road at the end of my career. I felt like that was the end of my career. It was knee surgery. So it was all them feelings. And, luckily that day I hadn't drank. I got to the other side across, and, that I sort of like just had a moment that I pulled myself back. And then I just ran in, closed the balcony door and just cried. I just cried all night. But, I guess in the end it was my religion and it was my family that brought me.
I was going to say, what pulled you back? Because it's interesting because, we look at the statistics around male suicide and we are four times more likely to actually complete on an act of suicide than women. And often we use that sort of aggression, that toxic masculinity, it kind of turns back on ourselves. You say like you're a guy that doesn't do half measures. So, you could almost say like, I know you said you've had suicidal thoughts on a couple of occasions. What was it that pulled you back?
But look, a few years earlier, my cousin committed suicide. He jumped off a 5-story building in Pakistan. And I've seen the effect of that on his mum, on his family.
Yeah.
And religion was one thing, but I couldn't do that to my family. I couldn't do that to my dad. And there's a lot of people when do take that step, and it's very polarized in that people call it selfish, and and to be honest, I just wasn't strong enough to do it. Scott, I wasn't strong enough to do that. Because I don't see that as selfishness. I actually see it as, for me to have got into that space, I felt like my family would be better without me. I felt like when they find out that I'd been doing what I'd been doing, that'd be, how that would make my dad feel. Someone would sacrifice so much. So that. But I just wasn't strong enough, to do it. But also at the same time, my religion and, what it would do to my dad just pulled me back in.
Have you had this conversation with your dad?
No, the first time they found out about it was when I spoke out and did my Sky interview.
Yeah.
And that was tough. That was really tough because it's the first time my family found out that when they thought I was living the dream, driving the flash cars, being on TV, and also if you saw me on the cricket field, you said, wow, so much confidence, captaining a team full of international stars and being able to, being strong enough, sort of be there and do it. You'd never, and that's what it goes down to, mental health. A lot of times when we see people who are being highly successful, extroverts, people who give a lot, that it's all give, but and exhaust themselves to that
but
stage.
We saw that, you only have to think about people like Robin Williams and the like. I mean, I read something just the other day, which is like everyone's fighting a battle that you know nothing about, and it sounds like externally everything looked good from the outside, but inside you were really fighting a battle for you, perhaps, and who you are.
And I felt like I've been back different battles because for a very long time, and I just, it got to a point, it just got too much, and I clearly got to a point where I felt like the world would be better without me. But also, as I've had instances after through this, I sat in front of the world, international television, and talked about how I came close to taking my own life, and to see, and I want to talk about the good people within this, but, while we're at it, to see the level some people went to after, to, knowing full well that that's where I was, to take me closer, or even, I felt at times through the last 3 years that, people who taught the good game in front of the camera, their ideal situation would have been me, ending my own life. But so it's
Well, it would have sold papers and it would have made a headline for.
well, it would have made headlines, but also
regardless of
it would have allowed cricket to go. Yeah, what, we're fine. We're going to crack on, and also I've seen through, because you learn so much with living under the life that I've lived under, and how many people or young sports people trying to make their way have we already lost? Because I saw there was an incident where a young guy committed suicide at a football club, and we will never know. We will never know what led up to that. And I think around sports, we've got to try and that stage of trying to become a sports person, becoming that sports person, and then what that identity is bigger. We need to get away from the PR around it, and we really need to start supporting people, because when I was in 2020, when I was trying to go back into the game and trial, one agent rang me and said, I'm speaking to county directors of cricket, and that in 2018, when I needed the support, my way of reaching out for support was I was retweeting and liking mental health stuff and suicide stuff.
Yeah.
So when in that conversation,
kind of feels like a call for help.
Someone help me. And in 2020, that agent said to me, when I'm speaking to directors of crickets and stuff, they're saying, that you're not okay because you're retweeting and liking mental health stuff. And that's really where sport is at with around these, big issues. And I there's a reason why I am, campaigning, if you want to call it that. I want to drive meaningful change in conversations that really matter to me. Whether that's around racism and equality, mental health in South Asians, and baby loss and child loss around for fathers, because these are subjects which I can talk about from a sporting element, and how the lack of support there is, or lack of structured support there is for human beings. But also I've had the luxury, I've had the great privilege of being around corporates over the last 12, 24 months. And I just think it's such a relevant, and the work that you're doing, and there's a lot of good people out there trying to drive these conversations into a human, authentic manner to drive that change. And I think it needs a lot of us to come together to really drive it.
You were telling me that you'd become an advocate, or you'd been working with an organisation in the UK called MQ. Why don't you just tell me a little bit about why you're working sort of with them and how important that is to you?
Super important. And there's a story behind it. And generally, a lot of what I do, there's generally some sort of connection and a human element to it. MQ, through my last 3 years, and especially when it was, what ended up being a fight that I didn't really want to have, but, I was going to stand up for myself.
Yeah.
A lot of people sort of get involved when it's good for them to get involved, individually and as businesses. And I felt really isolated for a large period of that 18 months. MQ reached out to me on Twitter in a DM, just asking me if I was okay and if I needed any support. And it was on a week or 2 weeks where I was in Pakistan, and I could not have felt worse through this last. I felt in a really bad place, and I felt like Allah had sent them to send me a message to see if I'm all right. And I got on a Zoom call with the lady and the CEO, and it was so authentic, and it was just it was at a time where they had nothing to gain out of being associated with me, but just wanted to check if I was all right. They're a charity. I got to know the charity, the people. They're a charity that focuses on research. Their big thing is, if it's not research, it's guesswork. And they're very, they're ever growing. It's the 10th year this year. But as people, they were just authentic and good people. And I built that relationship. And then when it came to sort of the resolve with Yorkshire, the only thing I asked for as part of my, as part of the settlement with Yorkshire was a donation towards a mental health charity of my choice. And they agreed, and it was all well. I asked for that and a donation towards supporting underprivileged children to get kits and stuff like that. They still haven't fulfilled that, but we'll leave that to one side. The MQ mentor, so it was no brainer for me. It was always going to be MQ.
Yeah.
And I think they were surprised because they're like we've only known each other and stuff, but from my point of view, they supported me when I needed it the most as human beings. And I was so proud to be able to help because I know a lot of these issues, a lot of these big subjects need resource. They need the resource for us to be able to, do this, and it needs support of organizations. So to be able to have, they're resourced very well. Never, when you compare it to, some of the other illnesses and where their resource, mental health's nowhere near.
Yeah,
nowhere
absolutely.
near.
Yeah.
I forgot the exact stat right now, but it's a big difference compared to cancer research charities.
Well, I mean, we look at the statistics as well. Like, our kids between 19 and 25, it's the second biggest killer globally. We see what's happening with men and suicide, and if that was a physical condition, if it was a cancer, the money would be flooding in. There'd be inquiries, there would be research, all that sort of thing. But because we're in this stigmatized area, somehow we're not spending on it. Yet it's killing our kids. It's killing us.
It's ruining every part of our society.
Yeah.
It's going back to MQ before I go into that.
Yeah, of course,
So and then I've been formed a relationship with them. And also. And we'll go on to the, I'm sure, the 2 days after, so they came to meet me just before I was getting ready for the DCMS.
Okay, yeah.
Day before, just to come and give me support. And then, when the sort of backlash came, one of the things which I didn't expect that came forward was anti-Semitic messages that I'd posted on Facebook, when I was younger. And when we talk more about it, I'll talk about every other detail of it. But MQ are their trustees. And their leadership is predominantly Jewish, and they stuck by me. And they stuck by me, because they saw, they met me and they saw the person I was, but also, how, the power of a proper apology, and also how no one's perfect. We make mistakes all the time, but I did exactly what I was asking everyone else to do. So they stood by me in that phase, and now we're now that sort of my sort of stuff has ended to an extent, and I'm sort of trying to use a platform for meaningful change, and we're working together on a few projects. So that's where MQ's come from, and I quite like the element of research and how it's different to but. That strikes out to me, and also from a South Asian point of view, because it's such a stigma, not enough people participate in that research. So how do you find solutions for people that we don't know?
Don't engage with the research.
Or we don't know what the problem is exactly. And with mental health, it's so personalized. The challenges can be so different for, you could see the symptoms. We could have same symptoms, but be different challenges that get us to that symptoms, and we react in different ways. So for that, you need to really understand the issue, and it again goes on to understanding what you're dealing with before providing answers. So that's the relationship, and it's for me. I got asked through the 3 years because everyone wants them to jump onto what's next, and I was very clear. There's 3 aspects for me. One is around mental health. Men's mental health as a whole, South Asian mental health. Second is around grief, and baby loss for fathers, but baby loss and also that connection of workplaces in both aspects is how our institutions, our organizations are operating in these spaces, but how proactively they can be better. And you've talked about it, and actually the advantages of it are huge in so many ways. And the third one is, my love, my cricket, creating opportunities, using my platform, because I feel like I've been given a platform, using my platform to create, help other people's lives. So they're my sort of three big things, and I know they're big, and I know that they're going to be tough, but you know, I'm so determined. And also, as we go on to the positive, I've been so lucky, Scott. Like, I've met some amazing people. You know, I've had some amazing support, whether that be in the UK, outside of cricket, or since I've been here in Dubai. You know, I'm a bundle of energy and a bundle of ideas and excitement. And, you know, I get that from people because I've been so fortunate that I've been connected to some great people. And now, you know, I got my golden visa last week.
Oh, congratulations.
Which I haven't actually forgot to tell you before.
Yeah,
So I got it all done.
Perfect.
So, you know, I'm sort of setting up a life here. And
Great. That means you can beat me at golf more often.
Yeah, well, I've not played much, but yeah, well, I'll try to. So yeah, but you know, you sort of, that's where MQ came about from, and something I'm very passionate about.
So one of the things and one of the pillars you talked about, the work that you want to do right now, and we're going into difficult territory almost with every single question. So sorry for this, but you talk about baby loss, you talk about grief. Your son was stillborn, and got to be, I mean, as a parent of a 7-year-old girl, I don't even want to imagine it. You know, how much that would just rip me apart. Your circumstances were also exacerbated by, you know, what happened with the workplace. But almost kind of looking back, your son's name, Alian. Tell us how you and your wife cope's the wrong word, navigated that period. What happened? And then we were talking with Mo Gardat, you know, and he was talking about, he lost his son, not stillborn, but he lost his son, and that gave him a mission. How has Alian continued to turn up in your life and continued to teach you lessons, to the point where, you know, we're having this conversation today?
Yeah, you know, tough, really, really difficult. I just, you know, up until, you know, even the pregnancy, you navigate through life, living in this bubble and living this.
You think everything's just going to go right.
Just, you know, you're not exposed to it. And I think this is where I've been sort of questioning the way we bring up our kids, or the way we bring up, you know, are brought up. And, you know, I was never exposed to grief or, you know, loss as, you know, as lucky in some ways. You know, my grandparents, you know, I lost my granddad in 2010. So I've never sort of childhood, and parents, you know, naturally parents keep you, you know, when someone's passed away or something, you don't really go, you stay at home, you know, the parents go to pay their respects and stuff. So because of all that, because I'd never experienced that, it was, you know, it's the first time where oh God, you know, but the pregnancy was, I remember going to, and I'm going to try and answer this in two ways. One is just you know, that would have been so difficult for me had it not been for my workplace and the issues in my workplace. Yeah. But because of all that, it sort of made it so much bigger. But it was, you know, we had a tough pregnancy. There was irregular heartbeat throughout. So, we were sort of, you know, in and out of hospital, but sort of a week before we got told everything was fine. You know, my wife had a baby shower, the nursery had set up, you know,
all that excitement,
all the stuff had been done. And, you know, you're sort of envisaging, you know, carrying your son from hospital, you know, all the good bits that are going to come after. The clothes were bought and everything.
Yeah.
The room was set up, and on the Friday I went to play cricket, which is a whole issue which has been talked about. So I don't want to go much into that. But I that was my wife's last appointment.
Yeah.
Where everything was fine, but there was a couple of tests that weren't done. And I didn't want to go to that game. I was sort of with everything else. I went. I didn't end up playing, so I was so angry with myself, and I still question myself and have that, you know, that guilt that whether I could have, if I'd have been at that appointment, whether I could have made a difference. My wife had that appointment, went home. I came back Friday night. You know, Saturday was normal. We did normal family stuff. Went to sleep Saturday night, and then went to my game on Sunday morning. When I went to the game, my mum rang my wife and said, I think something's not right. And my wife's like, no, I feel fine. She's like, no, something's not right, which is weird. And they went to the hospital and they got there and there was no heartbeat. And I was at the game and I was sat there, we'd done our warm up and I saw my director of cricket sort of take a phone call and get up. And I was looking at him, and for some reason, my stomach just went. And I had no idea that was. He'd get 20 phone calls a day. He got up, and I just thought, that's for me. Something's happened. And he came over, and then he told me I picked up my keys. That is the CEO was there, and I got in the car, and the whole drive home, I just screamed, and smashed my steering wheel, screamed, and got to the hospital. I remember, my wife was so confused and so she's like running to my dad, like, no, so help me, they kind of what they're saying, like sort of. And then, in front of her, I tried to be brave, but then, I went outside and my brother-in-law were consoling me and I was getting angry and screaming and, it was just that, it was so difficult. But then what followed in the next 4 days was just horrific. It took, so it was the 20th, it's just gone 5 years to the day. It was the 20th of May and it wasn't until the 24th of May that we got the baby out, which was so tough. Normally it's like a 2 or 3 sort of inductions, tablets, and it happens. And, my wife went through 5, 6. And to watch her going through that, and then, preparing for, the nurses were preparing us for the baby color change, bruises. Initially, I was like, I don't want to see, but my wife was like, she wants the baby on the chest. And, 5 days later, the baby came out and, you heard my wife sort of like just go, and she was like, oh, so like, and she had him on her chest. And he just looked like an angel. He, my dad sort of looked at him and said, I thought it was a boy because he looked like he had permanent lipstick on. He just looked amazing. And, then we spent the night with him and then I had to take it upon myself. So, I carried him from the hospital to home. My grandma got to see and then, to the graveyard and sort of putting him underground. That was just, to this day, it's just so difficult, Scott. And I just don't know how. May comes every year. It's difficult, and how I picture sort of just lowered him into the ground, and then everything else that went with it, and my workplace, which what we've heard, and how inhumanly that was all handled. When I say I lost faith in humanity, there's a good reason for that. And, like I said, I got told, don't neglect yourself. My wife was a mess.
Yeah.
Imagine what I'm feeling now. And I still see scars of that in our everyday life, and I went to Pakistan because I wanted, I sort of put a brave front on and saying, look, it's for me, it's for my cricket, it's for me. But I knew deep down that I needed my wife to have her parents around her, the support, and for a period of time, I had to sacrifice everything. And that meant work. One, because I couldn't function. But second, because I didn't want to put it on her, and I never have, and I've never said it to her. But, I knew what was the moment of the time needed. Deep down, emotionally, I'm a very emotional person, and I pick up emotions and, language. And I felt like at that time we both needed just nothing. And just love and support. And it wasn't that we weren't going to get it from my family, but, I needed her to have her mum and dad and her siblings around her. And we found it so difficult. It affected our relationship. We've been able to get through that. As a couple is nigh on miracle.
Yeah.
Because you know, as a couple to lose our kid, and it was our first, so you know there was a void, but also then I'm not earning, I'm not putting food on the table, and you know, as men we fight that battle, and you know we'll then start looking when someone. It was like if someone were too nice, it was like I don't want that sympathy. When someone was not talking to us, it was like no one support. You know, so you got into that. So there's so many battles, but I just knew I had to do whatever it took to be there for her. And, you know, we went there, and then, you know, my wife got pregnant again. And then we flew back we went on a pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia. And then we got back to the UK. And, you know, that second pregnancy was so difficult. Like we were going to the hospital, you know, 3-4 times a day.
You got terrified.
Terrified. Anything happened, we were there. You know, at times we were. So we changed hospitals. So we went to Sheffield now instead of Barnsley, which was 40 minutes away. And, you know, how to balance that with how to put food on the table. You know, it was just, but my support of my dad, my siblings, you know, because there was days where it was so difficult to just see any ray of light in your life. You know, that it's, you know, the biggest fear I've had in my life is losing parents, losing my dad, losing my mum, and what I'll do. And to have faced this has made me realize there's two big things in lives which are the ultimate, and that's, you know, losing your child or losing your parents, and, you know, how you deal with that. You know, you just, and people at the time said you just learn to deal with it in better manner as you get. But, you know, there's still days, and now what we've started to do is talk to Ayan and Mirha about Alian, and because, you know, he's my first son. He's still part of you.
He is part of your family and always will be.
He's part of my everything, you know. Yeah. The courage I've got to even speak about any of this is through him. The dark days over the last 3 years when, you know, certain aspects, certain people pushed me to the absolute end. You know, I've only got through because of my son, you know, because he's looking down on me, and I want to create a legacy for him.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that's really where my strength comes from, because on them dark days, I could have easily given up. But, you know, I felt like I was doing it for him.
Yeah.
And also the pain that lowering him into the ground has took me in. No one can get me close to that pain.
No.
No matter what Yorkshire did, no matter what the cricket people did, and some people, you know, there was a high level, I'm talking right at the top of the country involved at different times through this to end me. I'm a very strong person.
Doesn't scratch the surface in comparison.
You know, I don't see, and I talk to a lot of the cricket people through this about, don't take my willingness, because also, which is not, because it's not touched people's narratives, is I've been the only person over the last 3 years saying, let's just get in a room, because I know what it feels like to get to that space where you don't feel like life's worth living. And I don't want anyone to get there.
Yeah.
You know, none of the people on the other side, I've not wanted to. And some of them haven't helped themselves. Yeah. Some of them have driven a lot of stuff which has tried to end me throughout. But, you know, throughout all, I still have a lot of sympathy for a lot of them, because it was the way Yorkshire handled this and where cricket's handled it to a large part. That is, you know, and I've got no doubt that some people are struggling. But, you know, cricket people, cricket leadership throughout, I've been like, let's get in a room and sort this out, because, you know, I don't want any human being to ever, you know, feel like their life is not worth living, because I've been there. But, you know, at the same time, I am a human, and they've left no stone unturned to try and end me. But, you know, Allah, my family, my son, and what I went through, no one can ever get me close to that. And I knew that there was a bigger purpose here. And, you know, that purpose gets me out of bed today. That purpose is every part of my life today. And, you know, I'm so fortunate to be here. You know, every time I breathe, I'm fortunate. And, you know, I just want to, you know, make a difference in other people's life and, you know, have a lot of fun along the way.
Well, according to Google Bard, you're living that legacy out and you're manifesting that legacy. You're manifesting Allianz's legacy every day. So, I mean, it's a privilege to have you on the Mental Space podcast. One last question. And I know, let's perhaps look forward somewhat. That legacy, how do you want that to show up? You know, what do you want that to be?
Yeah, look, I'm hoping, so about 2 weeks before March the 20th, May the 20th, May the 24th, I got this light bulb moment, and it's something I felt I would do, but I thought I want to set up whether it's a foundation or something along them lines in Allianz's name.
Yeah.
And it was, it was too short to be able to put it together. So I thought, you know what, it's going to be 6 years to the day next year. And that gives me 12 months to, speak to people, because again, as you are doing, all of this stuff requires resource. And the one thing I wouldn't want to do is do it half-hearted, because I'll end up creating more trauma. So, I've been having conversations with good people in the UK, around the world, here in Dubai, and, to really collaborate and set up a foundation in his name, then which has different arms to it, and really collaborating, because I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to come together to, provide support for parents who have baby losses, practical support, how they handle that space with their workplace, with work life, and not just a counselling point of view. So, be there like literally to support them and get them through that phase, and be there and create, I guess, a community. Because one thing I found is there's a lot of people that go through this and just keep it bottled up.
Everyone thinks they're alone in this.
Yeah. And I guess it's creating that space where you can talk to each other, but also practically be there. And that means a lot of resource. I know that means, if someone genuinely, and I know this is big, if someone cannot work for the 12 months to be able to bring themselves together as human beings, as a foundation and as an entity, I want to be able to get to a place where I can support them. So that's one element. The second is around mental health. And, again, with you, with across the board with other people, is really, one, to open up and really share your experiences, because as you said, we're all fighting a battle. There is something going on, and how we can, create spaces, again, like a community, create spaces where we come together. But the big one in mental health for me is, well, two. One, with MQ and the research. Getting South Asians to really buy in and get rid of that stigma in the society, in our leaders. But it's the workplaces and the corporates to really understand their responsibility to human beings. And then that's in two aspects. So one, people very much, when they talk about issues, we talk about workspaces and the workers. But that's also the leaders. The leaders forget themselves that they're human beings. And everyone else forgets that they're human beings. And they end up firefighting for a lot of the time. And, and at the same time, look at that,
it's lonely
end
at the
goal,
top.
That bottom line, which, so it's how do we provide support, tangible support for them, to be able to, direct them to become the best version of themselves, and also be happy. So, creating that happiness across. So that's, and then cricket, and, I've got a very clear idea is in how I want to create them opportunities. And, the drop off in cricket, and the one thing is not just for South Asians, also, there's the data shows that one of the biggest sufferers within cricket in England on the drop is white working class. And, and there's a drop for South Asians from academy being at 30%, which is overrepresented, to nearly about 3-4% to being professionals. And that's a big drop off. And I know, from my experience, I know where that is. And, leadership. So I just did a corporate speaking event in London, and we were provided with census data. And our society You've got Slough at 63% South Asian, Birmingham at Leicester at 51, Birmingham, Coventry, Bradford 37. And the leadership and people making decisions are 95% predominantly white.
Yeah.
So you've got a real demographic shift. So you've got two aspects here. So today might be the right thing to do, but in 10 years' time, from a business, from a clientele and a customer service point of view, it will be the business point of view.
For the sustainability of the organisation,
it will be the only thing to do.
And it sounds like, and this is what I see in the workplace a lot. There's so much talent there that's being left on the table. There's so much talent there that's being overlooked, and there's so much talent there that's not being listened to. It just feels like organisations, in the private sector, whether they be sporting or whether they be corporate, really need to have a good look at, like, do we really want to be around in 10 years? Because if we carry on going the way we're not, people are gonna dial out. So
yeah, and on that, so people, you're gonna lose all of that.
Yeah.
So my sort of thing is for cricket, but I think I'm having conversations around the board with stakeholders, is maybe into other sports, is like, so that gap is, I want to be able to raise enough money to provide 5 male and 5 female first contracts in collaboration with counties, and say, we'll pay for it, and to get them through that door, and then, support them on that journey, but then be able to do that for, coaches, for media, for administrators. And then, so it's basically, they're my sort of 3 things that I want to do for the world.
Yeah.
And then, individually, I just want to, media and broadcasting and coaching is what I love. And, I want to do a lot of that myself and have some fun.
And we're deeply grateful for the fact you've agreed to be a judge as well for our first, the mentl awards in 2023 later this year. So thank you very much for that. Look, Azeem, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for being an inspiration, and thank you for joining us on the Mental Space today. It's been a genuine pleasure talking with you.
No, thanks for having me. And honestly, genuinely from myself, from the minute I've been connected to you, thank you for your support here. And also, I follow the work you're doing. It's, it's incredible. And honestly, you probably don't realize sometimes the impact that it's having to anyone like listening to it. It is important. And, big thank you for myself for making me part of the judging panel.
There goes the imposter syndrome. No, thank you. Azeem Rafiq. And remember, look, if you've found this conversation as powerful as I have, please remember, subscribe. We're on YouTube. We're in all the podcast platforms, and come back and listen to this conversation again, because it's so powerful. Thank you again one last time. Azeem Rafiq.
Thank you.